In other news, Audie Murphy, America's most decorated World War II hero and beloved Hollywood icon, was tragically found dead in the twisted wreckage of a small plane high in the Virginia mountains. The official story was heartbreakingly simple: bad weather, mechanical failure, and an unfortunate crash. The world mourned a legend lost too soon. But what if that wasn't the full truth? What if the most heroic man of his generation didn't just die by chance? For decades, the public accepted the tragedy without question. Yet behind the curtain, there were missing flight records, a strangely diverted flight path, and whispers, quiet, persistent whispers, of something darker. A government cover-up? A mission gone wrong? Or something even more unthinkable? It's time to revisit the final hours of Audie Murphy's life and uncover the truth that was buried with him in the mountains of Virginia. The truth is finally beginning to surface, and it's more disturbing than anyone imagined. Thanks to newly uncovered evidence, the mystery behind the death of America's most decorated war hero is cracking open. What really brought down Audie Murphy? And more importantly, why was it kept hidden for so long? Today, we expose the story they never wanted us to know. For decades, people accepted the official version: bad weather, tragic accident, end of story. But there's always been something off. The medals, the fame, the films, they painted a picture of a hero untouchable by fate. But the real story? It's far darker. And now, it's finally coming to light. Before we peel back the layers of conspiracy and silence, we have to go back to where the legend began. Audie Murphy was born on June 20, 1925, in Kingston, Texas, a place where opportunity didn't come easy. Raised in crippling poverty during the heart of the Great Depression, his family worked the land as struggling sharecroppers, often going hungry just to survive. But from that harsh, unforgiving soil rose a boy with an iron will, a fighter molded by hunger, hardship, and heartbreak, who would one day become the most honored American soldier in history. The Murphys had 12 children, and Audie was number 7. But in that cramped, crumbling household, numbers didn't matter. What mattered was survival. Shoes were passed down like heirlooms, meals were a question mark, and childhood was a luxury no one could afford. For young Audie, life wasn't hard, it was merciless. He carried burdens no child should ever face. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, the unthinkable happened. His father walked out. No goodbye. No explanation. Just vanished. His mother, Josie Bell, did everything she could to hold what was left of the family together. But poverty doesn't let up, and neither does heartbreak. The constant pressure slowly broke her spirit, and her body. By the time Audie was just 16, she was gone. And with her death, the last bit of safety and love in his world died too. Orphaned. Penniless. And now the head of the household. Audie had no time to mourn. No space to feel sorry for himself. Life demanded a man, and he became one overnight. He quit school after the 5th grade, not because he wanted to, but because hungry siblings couldn't eat books. He picked cotton under the scorching Texas sun, chopped firewood with blistered hands, and took any job that would pay even a few cents. But the heaviest thing he carried wasn't wood or sacks of grain. It was the crushing responsibility of keeping his family alive, a weight far beyond his years. It was emotional and never stopped. Those early years shaped him with a strong will that didn't waver and a resilience that didn't need to be praised. He didn't have any great goals, he just wanted to keep his family alive one hard day at a time. When World War II broke out, Audie didn't see joining the military as a patriotic duty, but as a way to escape the crushing weight of poverty and responsibility. He tried to join the army. The Navy and Marines both turned him down because he was too small. They saw weakness where there was more strength than they could imagine. Eventually, the army accepted him, and that simple yes changed everything. He joined the army in 1942, when he was still a teenager, and was soon sent overseas to fight in some of the worst places in the Second World War. He fought in North Africa, then Sicily and Italy, and finally France and Germany. That boy who had once picked cotton in foreign lands, Texas was now carrying a rifle through mud and blood while facing enemy fire. He didn't talk much or try to impress, but when it mattered, Audie acted. He showed a kind of courage that didn't scream, it just stood its ground. He wasn't the biggest or strongest, but he was quick, smart, and fearless when it counted. Over and over, he put himself in harm's way to protect others. He didn't run from the fire, he moved toward it. His actions weren't about ego, they were about survival, loyalty to the men next to him, and a deep sense of duty to his country. Other troops and commanders noticed that Audie was building more than just respect, he was also making a legend. On January 26, 1945, near Holtz, France, that legend was sealed. Audie and his unit were heavily attacked by German troops, who were outnumbered and outarmed. Audie told his men to fall back, but he stayed behind and climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, where he used its .50 caliber machine gun to hold off a whole company of German troops for more than an hour. He fought alone, was hurt, and won. He was out in the open, calling in artillery and firing non-stop. When help came, they found bodies all over the place, but none of them were American. For this, he won the Medal of Honor, but by the end of the war, that wasn't all. Audie Murphy had an unmatched 33 military awards and medals. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Bronze Star, and 3 Purple Hearts. Allies from France and Belgium also gave him honors. No other American soldier even came close. What was even more amazing was that, even though he was only 19, Audie was in charge of troops, taking enemy fire, and changing the rules of bravery. No medal could heal the damage that the war did to him, and when he came home, people saw him as a hero and a symbol of American bravery, but he was actually carrying invisible wounds. The screams of the battlefield, the memories of friends who had died, and the weight of life wouldn't go away. People cheered when they saw him in parades or on magazine covers, but they didn't see the nights he spent alone. He never pretended everything was okay, even though he was quiet and humble, his eyes told a different story, they had seen too much. Even though he tried to live a normal life, the past wouldn't let go easily. The man who had been alone in the face of German tanks now had to deal with something just as cruel in life after the war. He didn't try to be famous or brag, he just tried to keep going, and he did. He used everything that had shaped him, poverty, loss, and war, to become a better person. Make a new path. Even though the newspapers called him a legend, he didn't feel like one when he got home from war. He didn't walk into glory, he walked into a new kind of struggle. The uniforms were gone, but the weight of his experiences never left him. The masses' cheers couldn't drown out the noise that was still playing in his head. The battlefield was behind him, but the war was still inside him. People wanted to take pictures with him and politicians wanted to see him at events, but Audie wasn't trying to get attention, he was just trying to breathe. He missed the quiet moments that never came, even with medals on his chest. He carried the weight of those who didn't make it back as he cautiously returned to civilian life. It was clear that he still had more chapters to live. His fight wasn't over, it was just taking a different form as he moved from trenches to studios, from war zones to film sets. Audie Murphy never chose easy, he chose to keep going. What lay ahead for him was a different kind of battlefield, one with cameras instead of rifles, red carpets instead of foxholes, and crowds that cheered without really understanding what he had done. Stay tuned, because the next part of his story is full of fame and struggle. Audie Murphy's rise to fame and personal life. When he came back from the war, he wasn't completely whole. He was a hero, decorated, and loved all over the country. What made Murphy different from other veterans at the time was that he didn't try to hide what he was going through, he was open about it. Back then, people didn't call it PTSD, they just thought it was something that soldiers had to get over. But Murphy was honest about the nightmares, panic attacks, and the constant weight of what he had seen and done. He didn't put on a brave face for show, instead, he used his fame to talk about the mental scars that Murphy pushed forward even though he was in a lot of pain. Hollywood called, and he walked right in, not just because he was good-looking or had a hero image, but because he had a story that no one else could tell. In 1955, he starred in To Hell and Back, a movie based on his own memoir. The most interesting thing about it was that he played himself. He didn't have to act like a soldier, he just relived it. For the first time, people saw war not through a script or imagination, but through him. From the point of view of someone who lived it, the movie was a big hit. People felt something about it that most war movies never could. After that, Murphy didn't stop at just one part, he went straight to movies that matched his quiet strength. He was best in westerns and war dramas where the hero didn't say much but always stood his ground. He wasn't flashy, but he had presence. From the late 1950s to the 1960s, he was in over 40 movies, most of them as the lone gunslinger or the soldier with a past. These weren't just parts, he was himself in them. He gave those roles extra depth because he had lived the kind of life those characters were supposed to represent. But Murphy didn't just express himself through acting, he also turned to music and started writing simple, emotional, and straight-from-the-heart country songs. The next thing we're going to tell you might surprise you. Some of his songs were picked up by famous artists, like Dean Martin and Charlie Chaplin. By his 30s, he had already lived 2 lives, and writing songs gave him a third way to get his feelings out. It wasn't about becoming famous, it was about having something real to say and finding a way to say it by 1957. That year, Murphy became a familiar face in Hollywood. He shared the screen with James Stewart in Night Passage, which showed that he could hold his own with established stars. It also showed that he wasn't just a novelty act, he had something to offer. 2 years later, in 1959, he took on 3 roles. In 1 year, he was in 4 westerns, and each one gave him a chance to show a different side of his acting. In one, he paired with Sandra Dee, who softened his usually tough image. In another, he became a co-producer and took more control behind the scenes. It was clear that he wasn't just there to follow orders, he was learning how to shape the whole story. As the 1960s began, Murphy began to grow as an artist. He didn't just want to act, he wanted to make movies. In Cast a Long Shadow, a black and white movie, he worked quietly on the script. Even though his name wasn't listed as a producer, he had a huge impact on the project. These roles behind the scenes showed how much he was growing in the business. He wasn't just a soldier-turned-actor anymore, he was becoming a storyteller. Television also played a part in his journey. In 1960, Murphy tried a new type of screen when he appeared on StarTime with Thelma Ritter. This show showed that he could do more than just shootouts and stoic stares, he had range. That same year, the U.S. Army invited him to do a series of films. For 3 episodes of a TV show called The Big Picture. He didn't just act, he became the public face of the Army. In one of those episodes, Broken Bridge, he was taken to military bases in Europe and the American Southwest to show off new technology and tools that the military was using. It was a mix of storytelling and service, and it showed that he never really took his duty off. Some of his best screen work came from working with writers and producers who got him. One of them was Claire Huffaker, who wrote the scripts for 2 of Murphy's movies in 1961, 7 Ways from Sundown and Posey from Hell. Huffaker knew how to bring out Murphy's tough, quiet, and thoughtful side. Murphy's friendship with Willard and Mary Willingham led to another important partnership. Willard produced Murphy's 1961 TV show Whispering Smith, and the 3 of them worked together on movies like Battle at Bloody Beach, Bullet for a Bad Man, and Arizona Raiders. That wasn't all, this group also helped define Murphy's place in the Western genre. In fact, they wrote 40 Guns to Apache Pass, which was his last lead role in a Western. That script wasn't just another job, it was a kind of farewell to the genre he had helped create. Murphy wasn't afraid to take risks either. In 1966, he went overseas to film Trunk to Cairo in Israel. In 1949, he married actress Wanda Hendress. Their relationship started strong, but was full of tension because of Murphy's PTSD and the stress of life in Hollywood. After 2 years, they broke up. A few days after the divorce was final, he married Pamela Opal Lee Archer, who worked as an airline stewardess and wasn't used to being in the spotlight. Murphy needed someone quiet and strong, and in Pamela he found a kind of calm that he had been missing for years. Together they had 2 sons, Terry Michael and James Shannon. Terry was born in 1952 and later became famous, and James came along a few years later. Both boys gave Murphy a sense of balance, and Pamela wasn't just his wife, she was his. A man who had been through the worst of war and the chaos of fame had something stable in his home life, his wife and children. They gave him a reason to keep going, even when everything around him felt like too much. But there were still battles going on behind the scenes that no one saw, and as we move into the last part of his story, we start to see that not all wounds were from the war and not all enemies were on his side. What you're about to see on the battlefield will change everything they told you about Murphy's death. Stay tuned as we break it down. Audie Murphy died tragically on May 28, 1971. Murphy died in what was officially called a tragic plane crash. He was piloting a small twin-engine Aero Commander that went down in rough weather over Brush Mountain near Catawba, Virginia. At the time, the simple and sad explanation given was that bad weather, poor visibility, and pilot error caused the plane to crash into the mountainside. The story was over. There was a war hero, movie star, and family man who died in a tragic accident, but some people, especially those who knew Murphy or had been following his life closely, felt that something wasn't quite right. Soon after the crash, questions began to be raised about why the plane had flown so low through dangerous terrain for no apparent reason. Some pieces of the wreckage were never found, and parts of the flight record didn't match up with the final report. Investigators found more questions than answers at the crash site, but at the time, no one had the tools or access to dig deeper. The official reason stayed the same, but those who followed the story felt that something had been neglected or maybe even hidden. As the years surpassed, different theories began to take shape. Some whispered approximately organized crime, others pointed closer to mystery government agencies, some thought it had been non-public enemies with a purpose rooted in business or politics. Those weren't just wild rumors, they had been fueled by means of real details that didn't take a seat properly with the fundamental twist of fate narrative. Murphy had treated powerful humans at some point of his time in Hollywood and had contacts that reached into authorities' circles. There have been even quiet talks that he would possibly have come across sensitive statistics in the course of his post-war years. If that had been authentic, it gave weight to the concept that a person might have seen him as a threat. Murphy's own family by no means accepted the conspiracy stories they believed within the professional model, at the least publicly. However, that did not mean they were at peace with it. They lived with the ache and the gaps inside the tale. When human beings brought up the opportunity of foul play, his cherished ones dismissed it, but no longer with total self-assurance. It became extra approximately now, not wanting to believe the worst. Losing a person is difficult enough, adding betrayal and thriller only made it harder to transport forward. The silence across the crash lingered like fog, and the truth stayed buried for decades. But something came about that modified everything. Sit down tight due to the fact we're about to show something truly shocking. As generation improved and extra information from the bloodless struggle technology became public, new eyes returned to the crash. A set of unbiased investigators driven by using interest and an experience that something had been overlooked reopened the case. This time they were not working with guesses. They had get entry to wreckage samples, weather facts and flight logs that would now be tested in approaches that weren't viable back inside the early 70s. In addition, they had something else: declassified files that hinted at a bigger photograph. What they determined changed the whole tale. Deep within the wreckage they exposed signs and symptoms that the aircraft's control systems have been tampered with. Wires were reduced or rerouted in a way that could not be defined by means of effect or age. We aren't talking about random mechanical disasters. They seemed like planned actions meant to purpose a crash. The details weren't loud or flashy, but they pointed towards sabotage, and the more the crew dug, the clearer it had become that this wasn't just a tragic mistake. Then came the most unsettling discovery: a whistleblower, a person who had stayed silent for many years, progressed. This person claimed that Murphy had stumbled onto classified information, approximately covert operations, and that his moves have been watched in the months main up to the crash. In step with this testimony, Murphy had come to be a problem for certain human beings in excessive locations. He knew too much and wouldn't stay quiet forever. The crash, as painful as it changed into to imagine, won't have been an accident. It might work. Cowl up if real. This supposed that someone worked difficult to ensure the crash gave the impression of a easy Tragedy, the damage became hidden in a neat tale and the sector became left wondering it. Changed into simply horrific luck, however, with the brand new findings that version no longer held up the sabotage, the surveillance and the silence all pointed to something darker. It become not a query of what went wrong with the flight, it had become a question of who desired Audie Murphy gone and why. For Murphy's family, the reopening of the case added a brand new wave of grief. It wasn't pretty much loss anymore, it became about betrayal. The pain of losing a husband, a father or a brother is one element, but gaining knowledge of that a person would possibly have finished it on purpose delivered a different sort of weight. They'd spent years trying to heal from something the idea was an twist of fate. Now they needed to confront the opportunity that he became focused, silenced and brought from them via design. In the long run he may also were silenced by means of the very machine he had served. That possibility changed how humans pointed out him. He turned into now not only a symbol of bravery, he is an image of what occurs whilst energy turns in opposition to the people it's imagined to shield. Thank you for staying with us. Do you watch? There is extra to Murphy's death than they told us. Share your opinions with us within the remarks segment. In case you enjoyed the video, like, proportion and subscribe to our channel. Also click on the subsequent video to your screen and you may enjoy